reason, and why is it? Is it because of the Disneyland thing, and that this is such a hot topic right now, you guys?
Well, yeah, it's because of the measles outbreak.
Right.
Yeah, the numbers of measles episodes is dwarfing previous years. No, interesting. Dan Fitzgerald, again wisely weighing in, says, "Why can't we say vaccinate your child? Here's why." Instead of talking about mandates. Good question.
We should be.
That's a good question. Yeah.
We should be.
By the
way, Michelle, Carlton Hines says hello.
Hi. Yeah, no, and that, from my perspective, you cannot discuss a mandate and discuss education efforts at the same time. Automatically assuming that the government is the answer to a social dilemma is how we get things like Obamacare to begin with.
Bingo.
And I'll even go further and say there are other aspects to this vaccination argument that could easily invite more government solutions. One of the things that hasn't been brought up very often is people who come in from other countries don't have the same vaccination requirements or vaccination availabilities that we do. So now this issue becomes, do we regulate immigration with health concerns as being a primary reason for completely shutting down the borders? Are you
just look at what happened
who
this
come
summer,
into the
right?
country for vaccinations?
Look at what happened this summer. The people movers bringing all the kids and others over the border, TB and who knows what else. So exactly, that ties in exactly, Michelle.
I mean, really, this is not just a matter of, is the government responsible for ensuring that you vaccinate your children? This is really more a matter of, we know vaccines work. We know there are instances where people who cannot physically get vaccinated. And we know there are instances where people whose religious beliefs legitimately do not allow for vaccines. So if you are of a mind that those people their rights should be protected and their health should be protected, the answer is not a government mandate, but an appeal to scientific evidence, societal common courtesy, and an education effort that isn't based around something like you're an idiot.
Okay, so people on both sides of the political spectrum, as it relates to vaccinations, to global warming and climate change, based on their personal views, many of which are not founded on data or facts or history, are going to ignore them. So you guys, again, what is the solution? We need to solve this for the government as we speak. I mean, what is the ideal solution?
Well, in my mind, the closer the community effort, the better. So, getting schools who are, perfectly capable of disseminating information about how well vaccines work, and community efforts. And even if, the government has the ability to put out a huge PSA effort about, if we know how many times Obama's been golfing, why isn't the media and why isn't the government working on a huge PSA about the effectiveness of vaccines given the outbreak of measles right now? Why is this a matter of the government debating whether or not there should be a mandate instead of somebody, and there's a huge budget for, CDC PSAs when there's a health crisis. Mm-hmm. Why hasn't there been a huge response by the CDC to do an education PSA nationwide about the fact that measles are back and there is an easily, readily available vaccine that is 100% effective for this?
Yeah, without any sort of discussion as to mandates or requirements along that line. Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Michelle.
There's already a budget for these things. There's already a protocol for these things. They've done it countless times in history when there's been health concerns. Why hasn't it already been done? Why has it turned into a gotcha moment against right politicians? Because really what happens when a right-wing politician says something like, I think we should mandate vaccines, is like I said earlier, they've just thrown out 6 years of arguing that health decisions belong between a physician and a family.
Okay, so I think we just, we closed the loop on that. Although, as you were talking about the CDC, I remember the political response that they had to the whole Ebola thing. So, okay, this e-cigarette thing. Hausman and I talked about that. I think last Friday, maybe, Michael. Let's, Michelle, weigh in on that. What are your thoughts there? The taxes.
Okay, so e-cigarettes are an innovative invention. They're really a next step, not just for smokers, but to enjoy smoking in public places, which is kind of how they came about, but also to address a major health crisis. I mean, cancer and heart disease are the two top killers of adults in this country.
Hey, let me warn you real quickly, and then I'll shut up. Hausman is a rabid e-cigarette. He vapes a lot, so I don't know why I felt I should tell you that, but continue.
Actually, that's something I already knew, and I'm a social smoker. If I go out with my friends or whatever, I have a cigar or a cigarette, and so I actually picked up vaping because it was easier for me to vape standing outside of a building somewhere, particularly in Washington D.C. or whatever, than it was to light up a cigarette or find a place where a bunch of us could sit around and have cigars. And so for me, and because innovation and things like that are so, in the forefront of why our economy's horrible, to see an entirely new industry born of one, getting around the things that made those restrictions and made smoking antisocial, and to address health concerns about the carcinogens that are in tobacco, to me, e-cigarettes are a huge advancement, and they became popular. And therefore, the government's first response is to tax. And the taxing, of course, is twofold. One, it's a huge revenue issue. I forget where it was. I think, is it Arkansas? Says something like taxing revenue on e-cigarettes is going to bring in something like $15 million in revenue. I'm sorry, it's $1.5 million in revenue a year for them. For Arkansas, I mean, imagine what it does for a place like New York. Where cigarettes, if they're taxed exactly as cigarettes, where cigarettes are already $13, $14, $15 a pack. I mean, if you tax e-cigarettes the same way, the revenue is going to be phenomenal for places like New York City. But on top of that, this is a morality. This is a sin tax. Cigarettes were also taxed because the idea being that it's an unhealthy habit, and the best way to curb those kind of things, which, is to tax them to hell. So
yeah, it's interesting. I was at
not just a revenue; it's a morality judgment.
Right. A buddy of mine, his brother owns a high-end e-juice company called Five Ponds, and that's the stuff that I use. I was at their offices are not too far from my house. I was in there the other day, and they were talking about it. That as of right now, there's no regulation of e-cigarettes at all. Not of the vapors, not of the products, nothing. It's a full-on, free-for-all, open, laissez-faire marketplace. The EPA testing that is being considered for this is going to cost them roughly $150,000 per product line they have. So they have 10 different juices that they sell, and they have 0, 3, 9, 12, and 8. So they have 5 different levels of they have 5 different nicotine levels for each of the 10 juices. So they have 50 different products, and it's going to cost them $150,000 per product to get tested. So there's a huge money grab involved in it there. But the guy said that the basic thing is that states and municipalities and the federal government look at the massive revenues generated by cigarette taxes. They totally see the trend towards e-cigarettes, and this whole thing is all about getting on that revenue gravy train.
No doubt. Michael, I meant to ask you real quick here, and then Michelle weigh in, but I meant to ask you this the other day when we were talking about e-cigs. the juices, the e-juice, I guess, as it's referred to. I mean, on average, and I'm guessing there are different prices for different levels of nicotine or whatever have you, but how much does it cost in what quantity, ounce-wise or whatever have you?
Good question. It kind of ranges. It ranges between 10 and $30 an ounce.
Wow. So how long does it? I mean, how many hits, if you will, you fill up your e-cig with an ounce?
Well, it kind of depends on how your
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
e-cigarette works, but an ounce is like the equivalent of a couple of cartons of cigarettes.
Okay. All right. I'm done. That was. Thanks.
Right? Would you agree with that, Michelle?
Well, and I was, you know what I was I was actually going to say one of the things in particular that going back to the budget thing is back in December, and this is the absurdity of this argument. Back in December, Washington state government decided they wanted their budget included a 95% tax on baked products.
Wow.
The sole purpose of which was to fill a hole in the state budget. That was it.
Huh.
So,
yeah. Go figure.
you know, and then as an afterthought, they're saying, well, there's nicotine and it's addictive, and so we're regulating that as well. As you mentioned, one of the things that is never discussed by e-cig proponents is that there is zero nicotine available juice. So for people who like the habit but want to kick the carcinogens and things like that, you can get nicotine-free juice for e-cigarettes.
See, and that's just
bread.
I just don't get that because I am probably in a vast minority of people who I've never even taken a puff off a cigarette. Okay, so I don't get it. So why would someone? I'm just wondering. I mean, why would someone want to do the whole e-cig thing with zero nicotine?
Well, for several reasons. One, despite all efforts, smoking, particularly now that cigars are back in vogue, smoking is still a social event. And if you've quit, one of the hardest things about quitting smoking is the habit. You get over the addiction in a matter of weeks. But if you use smoking as a stress reliever or a break or just a way to relax, breaking that habit is a lot more complicated.
All right, I get it.
Yeah, that's what I found. I found driving down the street. I mean, for me, the nicotine wasn't that big of a deal. I get a small amount of nicotine in the juice that I use, not so much because of the addiction aspect, but because I like the way the nicotine has a reactive aspect, in your mouth and in your throat that the zero nicotine doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, the blowing the vapor and playing with the thing and all of that scratches the habit itch where a patch or a gum or something like that doesn't address it.
I'm just glad I never did it. I'm telling you.
Right. Another thing, Mike, is on the nicotine deal is if you're pregnant, nicotine is not good for you if you have a baby inside of you.
Well, that's true. So they could do that temporarily, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. Beyond that, there's really,
Right.
I mean, nicotine can kill you, but in the quantities you get from a cigarette or from an e-cig, other than just the fact that it's addictive, nicotine is basically harmless.
Yeah. All right. Dude, a minute.
Oh my gosh, Michelle, we're out of time. We barely scratched the surface of that, and there were two other things I wanted to talk to you about. So we're going to need to have you on again.
I could probably commit to that at some point in the future.
She said decisively.
At some point in the future, we may or may not extend that invitation again. In the meantime, you were a great guest, Michelle. Thank you for coming on. Folks, follow her on Twitter. She is at Galt's Girl. And as I sit here looking at the big sign in front of my desk that says, "Who is John Galt?" Saying that her Twitter handle is at Galt's Girl makes me smile. Michelle, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
All right, folks. So we are yet out of time again. This is Michael Hausum for Mike Miller and the Right Mics. We'll be back right after the break. Thanks for listening.